Hello everyone, and welcome to this video where we're going to talk about having permanent flask uptime on different builds, different ascendancies, different versions, and with different gear. So let's start talking about how this works first of all. So flasks have a certain amount of charges that it consumes when you activate it. And the way to regain flask charges, or to gain them overall, is usually by killing enemies or attacking bosses. But there are also ways that you can gain charges through, for example, the skill tree with the flask mastery. Utility flasks gain 1 charge every 3 seconds. And then you have different ascendancies like the Pathfinder that has this one called Nature's Boon in the ascendancy tree that gives you flasks gain 3 charges every 3 seconds, and so on and so on. So when you gain your maximum amount of flask charges, it can then activate if you have this enchant or this craft that says used when charges reach full. So if we recover flask charges, it will then activate as soon as the flask is full. And yeah, that's basically it. That's basically how it works. But we're going to go more into detail about how we make this permanent on this build, many other builds, this ascendancy, other ascendancies, different ways of doing it, and everything that goes in behind it. So this is going to be a little bit of a weird video because I'm not really a math guy and there are so many different variations that go into this. So I'm just going to explain all the different variations and kind of how it works. And every single time that you do this, it's going to be different depending on what you roll on your flasks, how much you go for in your skill tree, what build you're playing, what ascendance you're playing. Like, there's so many things that go into this. I'm just going to explain really how it all works. So you gain maximum amount of charges, it will then get activated. So you need to gain charges, obviously. So if you're playing this version right here that we're going to talk about, I'm a Pathfinder on this build and I have Nature's Boon. So every 3 charges every 3 seconds I gain 3 charges. But I also have this flask master over here that gives me utility flasks gain 1 charge every 3 seconds. So that means I'm gaining 4 charges every 3 seconds. Now you can increase that if you have increased flask charges gained, which I have in some areas in my skill tree, but I also have it in my ascendancy tree, like flask charges gained here and flask charges gained here because I'm a Pathfinder. You can also have things like this on your belt, increased flask charges gained, as you can see here, 24%. And you can also have increased charge recovery rolled on your flasks. So depending on how much you have of all of these, it's going to give you more than 4 charges. Like, let's say you have 100% of all of this, then it's going to give you 8 charges every 3 seconds. So you kind of get the idea of how this works. So you generate X amount of charges every 3 seconds. And then you have to think about, like, okay, how many charges does my flask consume? So if I get 8 charges every 3 seconds, that's basically 24 charges every 9 seconds, right? And if I generate 24 charges every 9 seconds, if my, for example, Quicksilver or my Jade Flask lasts for 9 seconds and it consumes 22 charges, then there you go. I will generate 24 charges during the next 9 seconds when the flask is up, and that is enough to make it get full, and it will consume 22 charges again during those 9 seconds, and that makes it just be up all the time. So you have to think about how many charges are my flasks consuming, how long is the duration of my flasks, and how many flask charges am I gaining. Those are the 3 main things that you have to think about when you try to keep your uptime permanent on your flasks. So as you can see here, I have rolled different things on my flasks, like tier 1 reduced charges per use, and the same thing here. And here I have tier 3 increased charge recovery. And on the Bismuth, I have reduced duration, but I have increased effect. Because on my Bismuth, I have elemental resistances on the Bismuth, and then I have crafted as well additional elemental resistances. And the reason why I'm doing this is because Bismuth has a very long duration on itself, and it only consumes 15 charges. So if I reduce the duration, it's not a problem. As you can see in the bottom left here, all my flasks are up all the time, and my Bismuth doesn't even go halfway before it reactivates again. So I can have reduced duration on my Bismuth and it's still gonna be up all the time, and this just makes it stronger with the increased effect. So I get more resistances out of this, and I don't have to get as much resistances on my gear. And that's basically the reason why you kind of want to do this on certain builds. Now, as I said earlier, there are different ways that you can do this. You can play the Pathfinder, and you can have all this flask charges gain, and you can have all this duration, and you know, you get like increased effect and everything. And then you have natural remedies that gives you increased duration and effect, and you know, the flask charges gained here, and Careful Conservationist gives you reduced flask charges used and 20% increased flask charges gained if you've dealt a critical strike recently, etc, etc. You can have medium cluster jewels, and so on and so on. And I'm also going to show you some other iterations of where you can do this without having to play a Pathfinder or having to play an Ascendant with the Pathfinder Ascendancy point in the Ascendant. You can play this. I've been doing this on a Raider. You can do this on any build as long as you get flask charges somehow, and there are different ways that you can get that I'm going to show you later. You know, like there's a lot of different ways that you can do this, but the Pathfinder is obviously the easiest to have good strong flasks and have them up all the time very reliably. So when we look at our flasks, we can see that it says last 9 seconds and 7.8 seconds and 7.8 seconds and 7.2 seconds, and consumes 21 or 22 or 20, etc, etc. Now the thing is, everything that you have in your skill tree, like the increased flask charges gained here, reduced flask charges used, and also the things that we have, the duration, and the duration, and the duration, and the duration, everything like that, it actually doesn't show on your flasks. So this diamond is up longer than 7.8 seconds. So is the jade, so is the quicksilver, and so is the bismuth. So it's kind of hard knowing exactly like what the breakpoints are, and like how much recovery do I need, how much duration do I want to have, etc, etc. It's kind of hard to know that. And you kind of have to like test your way through, because like I said, I'm not really a math guy, and there's so many different variations and so many different numbers that you can have depending on your gear and your flasks and what exactly you go for in the skill tree, etc. Like I said, it's a lot, but yeah, you have to keep that in mind though, that like it can kind of fool you. So one thing that you want to do have at least is quality on your flasks, minimum 20% quality, and if you have money or you can get it, try to get 28 or 30% quality, because quality increases the duration of your flasks as well. And as you can see here, I've invested in 30% quality flask in most of my flasks except for the quicksilver. And as you can see here in the bottom left, they are doing just fine. I have the uptime on them super easy because I'm playing the Pathfinder here and I have really good flasks. And I have this belt and I have everything in the skill tree that helps me keep these flasks up permanently. And as I said, the easiest way obviously to do this is on the Pathfinder or the Ascendant, where you get the Pathfinder Ascendancy points in there. But there are other ways that you can do this, and that's why we're going to have a look at some of them right now. So this is another version that you can do of the permanent flask uptime. In this version, I'm using the Traitor to gain flask charges. I also have this Careful Conservationist node, and I also have Natural Remedies with the Flask Mastery Utility Flask gained 1 charge every 3 seconds. And the way that this works on this version here is that I have a micro distillery belt, which means flask applied to you have 20% increased effect. So we have quite strong flask effect here. We have can't use flask in 5th slot, which is why I don't have a flask here. And then on the belt, I have increased flask charges gained, tier 1. And then I have crafted increased flask effect duration, rank 2 as well, 15%. So because of this belt, I can't have a 5th flask slot. But that's good anyway, because we need to have some flask slot empty in order for the Traitor to work. Flasks gain 4 charges per empty flask slot every 5 seconds. So it's basically the same here. We have a different amount of either reduced charge per use or increased charge recovery on our flasks. We have a certain quality, we have a certain duration, and we have a certain increased flask charges gained on our skill tree and reduced flask charges used and all that stuff. And in this version also, because of the brutal restraint timeless jewel in the name of Akara of Balbala, which is the reason why we have the Traitor here, I also have on the Claws of the Hawk here, I also gain increased flask charges gained by 10%, and then also 25% chance to gain Alchemist Genius. And all of this combined with the way that my flasks are rolled: tier 1 reduced charges per use, tier 1 reduced charges per use, tier 3 increased charge recovery, but this is the diamond flask, so it only consumes 20. And then on the Bismuth here, I have reduced duration, increased effect, because the Bismuth is so easy to sustain anyway, so it sustains. But because of the way that I roll my flask and everything that I have, I can just always have my flask up all the time without issues. Even on this build where I'm playing a raider, I don't have Nature's Boon. Instead, I'm doing this specific setup. And now I'm going to show you another trick where you can achieve permanent uptime on a Bismuth flask in order to gain a lot of resists, so you don't have to balance resists on your gear. And you don't need a Traitor, and you don't need to be a Pathfinder for this. So right now I have the Careful Conservationist, so I have the 10% flask charges gained, 10% flask charges gained, 10% reduced flask charges used, and 5% increased effect. Yeah, whatever. Then I also have the Flask Mastery. Utility flasks gain 1 charge every 3 seconds. And then down here, I also have 10% increased flask charges gained, and then I have Druidic Rite, which gives me 20% increased flask duration. So I have some increased flask recovery because of the flask charge gain and less used and duration and blah blah blah. And then I have 1 charge every 3 seconds. But you can also get, through the Searing Exarch implicits on body armors, you can get flasks gain a charge every 3 seconds. So that's 2 charges every 3 seconds. And here I have another Bismuth flask that now have 28% quality instead of 30. It only has tier 2 reduced charges per use, and it has the lowest roll on it as well. So this consumes 11 charges and it lasts 10.9 seconds. And here I also have tier 3 increased resistances. And as you can see here in the bottom left, I am actually sustaining this flask as well in my hideouts. It's always up all the time. So I can use this little trick by just having this armor, having Careful Conservationist and Flask Mastery. Or if you would go for Natural Remedies and that Flask Mastery, you know, or anything like that. Or if you want to drop Druidic Rite and go down here, like there are so many different ways that you can do this. You can even use medium cluster jewels with the flask nodes on them in order to get all these things as well. So you might not even have to get like Natural Remedies, or you might not have to get Druidic Rite, like only this is enough, or you drop this and you get like only Natural Remedies. Like there's so many different ways that you can do this by having this armor, like this implicit on the armor, and just having Utility Flask gain 1 charge every 3 seconds. As long as you have specific flasks rolled a specific way, you know, it's all about the math, like how many charges are you getting, how long is the duration, how much does the flask cost, blah blah blah, all those things tied in all together. There are different ways that you can have either a Bismuth uptime all the time, always sustaining on any build that isn't a specific ascendancy or anything like that. And you can make this work on other flasks as well, but then you might need to invest more and get some other things, you know, like I've shown you earlier in the video. But this is for another build that I'm going to be playing next league, where I wanted to have like the Bismuth uptime all the time because it gives so much resists. This flask right now, I have 60 fire, and when I put it on, I get 127 fire, you know, like, so it gives 40, 27, 67%, like, yeah, like it gives a lot it gives a lot of resist, right? So it's really nice to have this going on any build that you want to, as long as you can make this work somehow, you know. Yeah, it's super nice because I don't really have to worry about flasks. And I don't have to worry about resist, obviously. And also, 20% increased flask charges gained if you dealt a critical strike recently. This is something that you obviously have to consider as well. We already talked about this, but still, I'm basically sustaining this Bismuth flask, but as you can see, it drops very low before it like starts popping again. But if I had the 20% flask charges gained here as well, I would sustain it even easier. And that's something that you have to consider as well for certain builds or certain things that you're playing with this, that if you're critting, then you're going to crit sometimes, and you're going to have 20% increased flask charges gained because of that, and that way you can sustain your flasks even easier in every map and just all the time. So that's basically how the permanent flask uptime works. There are other versions that you can do this with as well. You know, you can get Forbidden Flame and Flesh Jewels and get Nature's Boon through that if you want to do it on Raider, or if you want to do it on Deadeye. You can get medium cluster jewels, like I said. You can get stronger belt, and there are many different ways that you can do this. Just remember that you need to hit the certain breakpoints. You need a certain amount of recovery and duration, and, you know, reduced charges per use and all that shit, blah blah blah. Like, there are so many ways that you can do this, and I really love this because I'm very lazy and I don't want to click my flasks all the time. And especially the Bismuth thing, where you can just get tons of resist on like almost any build where you can actually implement this on, feels fantastic. And I'm definitely going to start doing that a lot more myself on certain builds. And yeah, that's basically it. So thank you very much for watching the video. Hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you around.